So please help me welcome our next speakers. They're from Sundog. There's Tomasz Witkowski and Welsh. And this should be very interesting. They are talking about automated distribution workflows based on IMF metadata.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, I'm Rich Welsh from Sundog. This is Tom Witkowski from Sundog. I actually wasn't supposed to be doing this presentation. As you can see from the people involved, there are a few parties involved in this particular paper, but unfortunately Andrew Dunn from the BBC couldn't make it, and so he had a change of plans. But it did feel a bit weird doing this as two people from Sundog when so many people were involved, so I've got a solution, which, just for the purposes of today's presentation.
Yeah, actually it's not fair. Hi, I'm Tomasz. So it means I need to actually get now t-shirt as well, so sorry, I will change this as well.
So, what are you doing? Go on, go ahead. Oh, I see, a Sundog t-shirt, good. Right, okay, so what we wanted to talk to you about is the work we've been doing together with BBC and RightsLine on automated distribution workflows, and really it comes down to the fact that it's when you've got all these versions that you're making, not only language versions and formats and different compliance edits and so on, but actually looking at things like the rights in different territories and the rights within the content becomes quite a complex transactional business. And so what we've been looking at is how we might look at that workflow in terms of all of the components of the business, and then putting IMF at the center, or the metadata in IMF at the center, to help you navigate that appropriately.
It's too quickly. We should not say so quickly about IMF yet. But
oh, right.
Don't
sorry.
worry.
Don't tell anyone this is about IMF.
So we took a Blue Planet example, how many versions has been created. So you got the HD and UHD versions. So as we can see, it's very basic differences. And when you're creating this as a ProRes file, you need to create and render each version. So giving that, we got at least 10 versions as OV, and then you produce many language and subtitles versions from these versions, and then you apply this for the series and episodes. So sometimes we end up with the tens of thousands versions of the same content for the same TV series.
Oh, okay. So there are different components, parts to that we're looking at in terms of the business challenges here. The first is multiple masters, and as we said, there are different sort of compliance edits and so on. So you end up with lots of effective master copies of the same piece of content. There can be huge cost then that's driven by that. Not only the cost of making them, but the cost of storing them and delivering them, and even the cost of understanding what you've got in hand. Then you have also other content that's associated to the main program. So maybe if it's a TV show or a feature film, you might have value-added promotional material or extras material that's going to go with that content, and that delivers on a different timescale and frequently in a totally different production pipeline. So you have very different formats coming in, might be suboptimal quality compared to the main content. So that's a complex challenge as well. You have reference proxies, so if you're going to be doing dubbing or subtitling translations, you've got to get proxies made. Again, you might be changing frame rates to be targeted at the territory where that version is being made. So again, there's a lot to be managed there, and watermarking and so on. You need to then assess like the cost of doing that. So especially when you're looking at library content, you know, do you have costs associated with making the version for a particular territory which actually make it not viable to service that territory? And that's, especially with archive, can be an issue. And then finally, delivery driven by revenue. So really this is about having some sort of transactional component that allows you to then understand how you're going to monetize that content properly, rather than simply making it and then hoping you get paid, or delivering it, or not knowing whether you should deliver it in terms of the transaction that's got to take place. We'll explain that a little bit more.
So definitely you need to deliver this master, and sometimes when you acquire the content and when you need to deliver the content, sorry, it's wrong button. I used, okay. Okay. So this is the example when you need to deliver the content. And for example, on the end of the financial year, it's always peak with the delivery contents. So if you need to deliver all this version or masters to your third tier and parties who acquire the content, you end up with sending the peta data, petabytes of data in the same time. So it's very hard to manage to send all this content together. So that one is just show the example that 25% is always on the end of the financial year.
So well, the reason this project kind of came about was because looking at this with the guys at Rightsline and BBC, we all knew each other and we all knew we were doing work in different areas. So the BBC, obviously, the operation in this process. Rightsline a look around business processes, and Sundog is a technical workflow company, so we actually sort of make the files. But none of us were sort of domain experts in the other areas. So really what we felt would work here was if we could come up with a framework that worked where each of us kind of looked at that. This framework could be a template for anyone, obviously working with whoever are the domain experts that you want to work with.
So it was very, we undefined the main participants and the parties which is working in the workflows. So we draw very basic information about how the processes look, which milestones is there, and how you assign these milestones and the tasks to the groups of the people or departments. So we undefined a finance department which is receiving payments and issue the invoice. Then we go for a rights management system as well, how it's working and what is needed and how you acquire the rights and how you sell and close the deal. And then you got a operation department which is thinking, okay, how I need to charge, how much time I need to do that, and what kind of the resources I need to schedule. And then you got a R&D which is thinking about software and different system which is need to be combined together. And then it's coming actually the technical department, which is doing the editorial, which prepare the files, they sending the files, where to send the files. So all these people is involved together, and sometimes we notice there is so much disconnection between them. And the systems, they are disconnect as well. So we went directly to the Holy Grail. So what is needed is this Holy Grail of media. So how to connect all this system together via API and orchestrator, and what kind of the information we need.
So this isn't me, is it? It's you next. No, it's you.
Yeah.
Oh, and this is me.
This is
yeah. So part of the project was looking at how we would get to some meaningful objectives. So in looking at IMF or rather metadata actually at the core of this, what does metadata give us and how can that drive the objectives of the project? And the things that really stand out about a metadata-driven kind of process is that, firstly, it's very lightweight. So the files themselves are quite small. So they're easy to move, they're quick to move, they're easy to store, they don't take up much space, and they're quick to access and search. They give you really good searchability because you're not passing the content itself. They actually contain all the information you need if you've got a well-structured metadata scheme. And not to say that we knew straight away how much metadata we would need, and we'll discuss that a little bit more later. IMF seemed to have that component, so we had pretty much what we wanted. And so those key components allowed us to drive the objectives. I should also say, actually, at this point, that there's a lot of detail in the white paper that is not either on these slides and that we're not going to talk about today because we simply take all day to talk about it. So I thoroughly recommend you go and look at the white paper. You'll find a lot more detail around all of these points in there.
Definitely, yes. And I think once we undefined that we want to use the metadata, definitely we said, okay, now we got almost everything what is there, what we need to connect, and then think, okay, which technology we use. So we went straight away to understand a little bit about rights management. So we definitely over there. I think it's your
Yeah, so I mean, this was the interesting part, certainly from my point of view, understanding the rights. Now, in a simplified sort of sense, you might think, well, we make some content, we own that content, we're going to sell that content into a territory, therefore that's the rights component done. But actually, if you look at what's involved, there's huge amounts of rights issues about what you do and don't have the rights to sell. So is that content coming from original photography? So the photographer might, especially with like wildlife photography, photographer might own it. If it's archive footage, where are the rights for that? What about the music? And then once you've got that content, what are your rights in territory? Has that content been used elsewhere in that territory or not? So there's actually quite a big complex rights management issue. And we're going to show you a short clip, actually. And what you'll see in here, obviously, is some wonderful footage. But what we'd like you to think about as you're watching it is that every single shot in here might have different rights attached to it. And once you start thinking about just this shot in itself, or this sequence in itself, might have tens or even hundreds of rights issues across just that sequence. Imagine a whole show or a whole season or even a whole franchise and all the rights that might go along with it.
The oceans cover 70% of the surface of our planet. And yet, they are still the least explored part of it. Hidden beneath the waves, there are creatures beyond our imagination. With revolutionary technology, we can enter new worlds and shine a light on behaviors in ways that were impossible just a generation ago. We've also come to recognize an uncomfortable fact. The health of our oceans is under threat. They're changing at a faster rate than ever before in human history. Never has there been a more crucial time to explore what goes on beneath the surface of the seas. In this first episode, we will journey across the globe from the warm waters of the tropics to the coldest around the poles, to bring us a new understanding of life beneath the waves.
Cool. I actually feel like a charlatan now wearing this T-shirt when we had nothing to do with making that. But it does remind you that, you know, all of this in the end has to be around delivering amazing content. And, you know, everyone here is, in the end, that's our function, right? We're getting stuff to entertainment experiences to audiences, or content experiences to audiences, and doing it in the best possible way. And again, that was something that was driving this at its core.
By the way, this content was created from the HLG master, and this was just using the R&D lab from the BBC to go for the Rec 709 data. We done very similar transcoding from the HLG mastering to the Dolby Vision for the projector on the IBC on the same content by using a LUT from the R&D from the BBC. So back to the rights management. It's actually very interesting. The most important thing from the rights management, what you need to understand, so it's avails so it's saying about rights and what it stays from the rights. And then you're going for the dimensions and also parties. So parties can include, as Richard said, actors, composers, photographers, cinematographers, music rights, etc., and the clips. And dimension is a variable matrix between when it need to be delivered, when the fulfillment needs to be done, and where and which territories is there. So it's pretty complex, but we were looking on this and we were saying, okay, how we can mesh this with the IMF and how it can treat the information and look on the metadata. So why IMF is good? Because it got the OPL packing list and it's got the CPL packing list and OPL. So all these files, they are XML files which got all the information in about content, and not necessarily you don't need to access the content. As such, as assets, you got all the information, what is there. So very quickly about CPL metadata. So we done a small blocks and internally, and we call these blocks about, so we got the block in the XML. So when the first one is a prologue, where you keep the information about content, is it a episode, etc., or which name is got and how you're doing. Then it's a block which is a content version metadata. So you can keep in there your IDA number, you can go to ISAN, you can go for your internal tagging numbers, etc., etc. So you can exactly match for your systems where it's there. And then you got a local list, so for which territory is going, where is going, and why, and for which advance is there, and you can keep your rating. Currently on the IMF, people don't using that, but it's a very powerful information. And also, the very important one is extension properties. Extension properties metadata got so much possible fields where you can put. Anyway, the whole idea was to translate a metadata as well and how it can be displayed. So you got on the left side is a XML, on the right side is what information you can take in seconds for this information. Then packing list is actually saying what you have in the package, how big is it, how the assets is related, and then how long you need to send that. So you can calculate this very quickly. And then we got the OPL. So Raymond and Ajar was talking a lot about OPL, but in our occasion, we just used the very simple OPL with the preset macro. Definitely on that, because it was tested already by group. And in this occasion, the OPL encoding is required the CPL, and the CPL has become the version. And we use in here the only one version, language version per CPL. So it means if we create the other languages, we create another CPL. We need to remember that OPL in this occasion can go to the one CPL, but one OPL can actually servicing the many CPLs as well. And then transcoding, reading the OPL instruction, ingest the information, and can do a transcoding to the OPL. And this one is very basic automated workflow. So you ingest the OPL to your transcoders or to any software which is doing that. Is validate information. Is go to your CPL, looking for the assets, because CPL is looking for the assets, and then you start schedule your resources, and then you encode your content. And
yeah, so the beauty of doing this again with IMF is that the core framework doesn't change regardless of what application you're using. So all that metadata, or the power of that metadata, can work across multiple applications. And so we did test it on more than one application so that we could see that we could centralize the kind of useful information whilst not restricting ourselves to any particular format that was required. So we used the RDD45 ProRes application and the new DPP application, which is also TSP 2121, which is SMPTE's first technical specification. And that's actually really important because that specification is now available. You can go to the SMPTE website right now and go and get TSP 2121 for free. For free. And so, you know, this is quite a big deal. I mean, this is a new phase, I think, in this kind of work and this kind of interoperability, that you've got the rigor of, you know, SMPTE working on it, but then you've got the kind of almost like open source community availability of that standard. So I think that was a key component here as well. You don't want to start going down a route where, you know, it's going to be costly to implement as new things come along because of the cost of just meeting the technical specification.
So once we had all the information, we had the basic draws, we combined this to the one big workflow. So this one is example of the workflow, how it's going to work. We can't go to the details in here. So white paper is actually saying what you need to do on the which steps. And what if you support IMF or you doesn't support the IMF. The whole idea was that we define the milestones and then go for the participants and the business and experts. So in this occasion, I think I will not really go in deep because we don't have a time anyway.
No, but no one can, like, that could be anything, Tom. Like,
Yeah.
it's literally just made up, loads of boxes and lines. So yeah, you should go and have a look at that in the white paper because it's clearly meaningless up here.
Yeah, I know, but each node got so much information and
Look,
so much sub-processes.
I
Even
understand,
white paper doesn't cover that,
yeah,
actually.
okay, but mate, if I'd had to create that, I'd want to put it on the PowerPoint as well so everyone could see it.
Yes.
It's pretty complex. So, yeah, it's not without its limitations. So we identified areas that we felt needed some more work to really make this actually work in the future. So this is definitely a work in progress. It's not something that's out of the box ready now. So the CPL, for a start, doesn't have all the kinds of metadata that we want, particularly around the rights. That was clear that we need some work on that. The OPL, it's complex. It's actually well-defined. So in principle, we can go and do that right now. The OPL is well-defined, but realistically, it's not well-tested. So what we need is a lot more testing with different OPLs and a lot of work across lots of parties to prove that that does exchange well and that it can fit with lots of different systems creating the files themselves. And then the final part that isn't there at all, but it's definitely something that's being called for and is being worked on, is a delivery schema. So in terms of the metadata that's in there, we've got tons, really. So there's deep content metadata, so that typically is going to be generated by running sort of content recognition systems, AIs over it, and pulling out lots and lots of real deep information about the content. Content metadata, the higher level content metadata, which is typically more programmatic and is likely to have been entered by the people making the program, the production. The rights metadata clearly has to come from multiple sources, and actually that in itself is a huge challenge. So collating all that data, which could be on post-it notes and PDFs and emails and all sorts of things. The actual CPL, the PKL, and the OPL themselves. QC metadata, which is really powerful, again, that the ability to test and track testing and look, especially when you're dealing with hundreds of versions, being able to have a good high-level overview of what's going on in the QC phase allows you to spot problems a lot earlier and fix them more easily. Identify metadata, as Tom said, like IDA and so on. Post-production metadata, because you may well come back to this later, and having things like camera metadata and grading information and so on is really powerful as well. And then file and technical metadata is kind of just the kind of technical data about content itself. Again, it's deep metadata in terms of the technical structure of the content.
And definitely you want to use this as in the mezzanine format, and sometimes it's needed, and IMF got the limitations, so we were working, this one is from extract from the document, from draft document from what we were working with Bruce as well, and we've done. It's about a visual track, the metadata. So in the timeline, you can have even 20 different tracks with the metadata. Then when it's become the standard wrap TMXF, it's actually over there. You edit your master, you edit the metadata as well. It's actually perfect for keeping all in one place, edit on the same time. In this occasion, the delivery schema, again, this work on the IMF user group, and in my opinion, and others' opinion as well, it should be standardized, and it should become the standard which will be help what you need to deliver, when it needs to be delivered, and how it needs to be delivered. So in this occasion, it's for the IMF use, but in the future, to be fair, this delivery schema is can use for the NFIs as well for the downstream. And then, here you go. We got 17 seconds though.
17. Go
Yeah.
fast.
Oh, no, okay. So it's so many different benefits of making these workflows. And on the automated workflows, because currently it's at 98% workflows is done manually, and automated workflows can help you to find the content and very quick search for the information and assign the metadata to the content.
And in terms of negotiating the deal, I mean, really, this has to be about reducing friction in the business process, and it definitely does do that. It gives you good visibility quickly to all of the information you need to know about how you can deliver the content and what the rights and costs would be around that.
So giving that there is archive solution, for example, somebody, if they got the content, they don't know what they keep, what is big cost to actually retrieve these files. So if you merge this in the IMF, you can find these files and they deliver on the best quality ever and do the transcoding using by OPL if somebody doesn't support IMF. So that's one was in the work.
Yeah, and in terms of the, as a solution for elements, I mean, in the end of the day, this is really about delivering the best looking content. You've got the best possible elements at hand. You can make the best possible looking output content, and you have the power to do that without really either restricting yourself or giving that away by not having control over the downstream process.
And finally, it's IMF advantage. So it's actually amazing because it's less to QC because you can see the data. It's less to store, so there's many different documents which is saying how much to store. It's always the best quality master. It's always keep the same frame rate what the content should go there. But also in this occasion we use the CPL as a version which we can deliver this CPL instead of the big content. And also, what is the important? The OPL is a component which you can actually edit. You can make so many different OPLs for a one CPL, and this one is your instruction, the tech piece, and you can assign to the your rate cards.
And it's a standard.
And it's a standard.
That helps. So, I think that's us done. And any questions? Oh, one question, it better be quick.
Okay, so this paper or this presentation was about automation. Have you used automation for this project or other projects where a client just pulled a CPL out, submitted it, and Sundog infrastructure just generated the deliverable and shipped the deliverable where someone wanted it?
Yeah, I mean, we do that now at scale, and I mean, we're only the core component for creating that and deliver. And well, I mean, it goes wherever you tell it to go. So yes, you can define where the source asset's coming from, and yeah, you kind of give it one instruction set. It makes as many versions as required from those assets, and then puts them where you want them to go. And it does that right now, and nobody really sees or hears anything. It does it quietly in the background, which is kind of what we want. But in this particular instance, it's obviously a much more complex ecosystem it's interacting with. But at the end of the day, for us, it's the same thing. We want that simple instruction set that says, go make this and put it here. But the beauty of this is that for the people actually doing it, everything they need to know is existing in that metadata. They know how much it's going to cost to process. They know before they do it. They know what it's going to cost to get it to territory. They know what their kind of rights and costs are in territory. And essentially, they're going to be in a position where they get an order that says, I want this to come from, I want this version to go to Venezuela or Hungary or New Zealand, and I'm going to push one button when I see that, all that laid out, and I know what it's going to cost me, and I know what I want to do. I push one button, and it happens. It goes all the way to the customer. Oh, have we got time for any more? Is that it?
Yeah, super quick question. Thank you for the presentation. You referenced the white paper. I didn't see the presentation or paper download on the SMPTE website. Is that to follow, or is that another white paper you referenced?
Doesn't it get
I think
emailed
it's
to
my
delegates?
fault.
Yeah, you'll get an email
Yeah.
as a delegate. You'll get an email which will give you a link to the library of all the white papers for all the presentations.
I have the email, I have the link, I have the papers, but yours is not in there yet.
It's not us.
Okay, maybe it's some glitch. Maybe I didn't actually put a available for the download. So, so
I'm glad I'm not
we'll
from
fix
Sundog.
that.
I'm
We'll
glad I'm
fix
not
that.
from Sundog. That's, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please tap the like button and also subscribe to our channel to receive notifications when we add new content. For more information about us, please visit SMPTE.org. We'll see you next time.